Thank you very much. Just getting myself set up here for a moment. Okay, firstly, just before I start, I'd like to, on behalf of our Managing Director and owner of Deppro, just want to thank TIC for these great events and for inviting us here to participate. And also we were very, very pleased to bring Mario here from South Sydney. As you know, we sponsor South Sydney, and one of the reasons why we sponsor South Sydney is because, as Mario said, they've been around for 105 years. They've got a great pedigree. And quite frankly, we say the same thing about TIC. We're with you all the way. You guys got a great pedigree, doing a fantastic job, so we're very happy to participate at all the events. Okay, let's get started. Now, normally, okay, this is me. Pamela is here as well at the stand, so that's Pamela if you want to see her a bit later on after I finish speaking. Now, normally I do a presentation which goes for an hour or perhaps 45 minutes, but what we've tried to do this time, TIC asked us to do, is just do 3 10-minute lots. So there might be a little bit of overlapping here, but the most specific thing that I want to do is really talk about second-hand properties. But for those of you who don't know about Deppro, we started in '99. We're a national company. We're tax depreciation specialists, which is very important because it means we do about 10 to 15,000 a year. So somehow, since 1999, we certainly know what we're doing. If you do the same thing over and over again, as Mario said, learn to tackle, just keep doing it, you're going to get very good at it. We're ATO approved and compliant, and that's something that we monitor constantly. You have to in this industry because rates change and different benefits change as well. We're technology driven. We're just about to launch an iPad system whereby our field staff will have iPads, so the reports will get to you much faster because information will be transmitted straight to head office from whether in Karratha in Western Australia or we're in Geelong. It'll go straight to our head office and be done very, very quickly. We do pride ourselves in being professional and personal, and this is about being personal. We go to a lot of events. I speak at a lot of accounting events as well, because we want people to know us, that we give our cards with our mobile numbers. I know many of you here, I've given my card and said, ring me on my mobile if you want any advice. That goes for everyone in Deppro. We're very accessible. It's just part of the service we want to provide. And if you want to be successful in business or in anything you do, you have to provide a very good service. We've had a 10-year relationship with TIC. In fact, it's probably been longer than that, but I think it's a nice round number. So we've been around a long time, and we've worked with this organisation for a long time, and we treasure the relationship. So second-hand properties. There's always been a bit of a myth about that, but there's two sides to it, really. The age of the property. If the property was built before 87, then you need to talk to us first. Because if it's built before 87, then prima facie there's no capital works left in the building. Because, in fact, the legislation said that after that, before 87, it doesn't apply to that building. However, if it's after 87, then simply there's 40 years from the construction completion date. And anything else that might have happened after 87, so things were added, and I'll go through it a bit more with you. So therefore, when people ask me about second-hand properties, all I ever think about is you get 40 years from the date it's constructed. So in fact, if you bought a property tomorrow which was built in 1987, I did it earlier, yes. So the math would be that that property can be depreciated until 2027 at 2.5% per annum on the construction cost, the original construction cost. So there's no big deal about it. If it's after 87 or 87 and after, there is still 2.5%, depending when you buy it. So obviously if it was built in 87 and you bought it today, you would have some 14 years left at 2.5% on. But that would be on the construction cost, and we as commodity surveyors, construction cost in 1987, of course. So it's going to be a relatively low figure compared to what if it was built today. But there is still life in it. That's the point I want to make. So capital works, what are we talking about there? We're talking about the building, the cost of altering the building, cost of capital improvements to the surrounding properties. So there's a lot there for us to work on. So when we look at properties, we look at extensions. You see, the property on the left there, the older property, possibly is pre-87, but we know now that they've built something perhaps last year, and that whole area can now be valued and depreciated for 40 years, that extension. Now, when we're out there, we're looking for the telltale signs. So if you ask us, why do we go and view properties? Why can't you just do it? You know, the client tells you how much it costs and what have you. It's because we're looking for things. So if you buy an older property, sometimes it's hard to know whether, particularly if they've cement rendered it or something, it might be hard to know whether there was an extension done at some stage. We're looking for telltale signs, like on the floorboards perhaps there. We're looking for the extension lines. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for to establish, all right, this looks like it's only been done 10 years ago. Let's look at the historical data on how much it would have cost to build a room this size 10 years ago, let's say. So that's the sort of work we do. Again, older property, new kitchen. If there's a new kitchen, now I work in Sydney and I do a lot of inspections as well, and there aren't that many properties in Sydney now that were built in the 60s or 70s that haven't had a lot of work done to them. It's a simple fact of life that there's been a lot of work done. So you will get, say, a kitchen like this. Well, obviously it's pretty flash, but it's a new kitchen. And so we look at that kitchen and say, okay, if the current owner didn't do it, we try to establish when it was built, and we have to estimate sometimes. We look at how much that cost, and then that kitchen, taking out the appliances, we estimate the value of it, and then we depreciate it 2.5% per annum for 40 years. So there is life in second-hand properties, and there's another bathroom is another example. Now, a swimming pool, since February 1992, if your house has had a pool built in it, so you buy a second-hand property now and there's a swimming pool in it. The property was built in perhaps, say, 2000, and in 2002 someone put a pool in it. Well, then we would look at that swimming pool when we went there and say, okay, that's a pool that was built since 1992. We'll value the pool, how much it costs to construct, and we'll give you a 2.5% depreciation on the swimming pool, and the fences, and the paving, and the motors, and everything else. So there's a lot to do in second-hand properties, and there's a lot of opportunity in second-hand properties. One of the things that just as a bit of a tip, when you buy a second-hand property, and let's say very often we'll buy a second property, the first thing we want to do, we want to gut it, and we want to put in everything new so we can get a tenant at a good price, at a good rental, which is great. There is another strategy, particularly if there's already an existing tenant. Now, I'm not suggesting you do this, I'm just suggesting this is a possibility. If there's an existing tenant already, you may want to leave it as it is, if the tenant's happy enough, for about, say, 6 to 9 months. And then, after that, you've established that you have had income producing, you've used that entity or that building for income producing activities as it was. And that means then that if you then gut it out, you can depreciate what was there in that year. So what you would do, you would ask us to come in on day one, and we would value the property as is in its rough state. You would establish that you've used it for income producing activities for 6 to 9 months, and then you decide you're going to gut it. And once you gut it and take it all out, you'll have all the receipts. You know exactly how much it cost you to put in the new kitchen, the new bathroom. We've given you the estimates of the cost of the value of what's already there. The accountant has our report, and he also has your new receipts and everything else, and the accountant can just do it, write that off there, and then make these the depreciation of the new stuff. We don't have to come back in again because the accountant's got all the figures. So it's just one way of doing it. Most of us do like to go in there and clean it up and get new tenants, but if you have an opportunity, that's not a bad way of doing it. You can't just gut it straight away. You have to show the taxation department that you've used what's there for a reasonable period of time. And again, you can always ask us if you've got that opportunity coming up. We can discuss it further and with your accountant. So that's just a tip that I'm just leaving with you. Now, settlement date. Okay, so you buy a property, and I've just picked up one of these brochures here that TIC have for their second-hand properties, and I noticed wonderfully that they've got the construction date. So this one says 2007. So 2007, that was 6 years ago, so there's still 34 years at 2.5% on this property here, the ones that, all the ones that you'll see outside on the stand. Now, in relation to when you buy it, it's going to be 2013. The inside, and it's got to do with the settlement date, the inside, all the fixtures and fittings will get a new effective life. And that's even if the previous owners have claimed, because that's done. Remember, all these things that we do in taxation, depreciation and benefits, and they're all government incentives to get people to buy, to get people to sell, to make it worthwhile for people to take risks like yourselves in property. So when a new person comes in, they've got to give them the same kind of opportunity as they gave the previous owner. So everything gets a new effective life. So, however, anything that you do after you've bought it, after the settlement date, then you need the receipts. But anything that was done before settlement, we will go in there and estimate what it cost. But you can still get the benefit of it. So pre-purchase improvements, That's us. That's where we come into. So I made my point clear. When you buy a second-hand property, you've got to know the construction date, so the construction completion date, so you know how many years you've got left out of the 40. So if it's only 10 years old, you've still got 30 years, which is great. And the settlement date's important because at that date, then everything inside, the fixtures and fittings, the kitchens, the appliances, the carpet, the curtains, all those things get a new lease on life, as I'm showing you here. All these things here, even if they've been there for 10 years, they'll get a new effective life. And there's a formula for us to do that. Paul, I don't know if Paul's here somewhere, but we've been discussing that at length in relation to that. It is a little bit confusing. He said, well, but this stove is 5 years old. Well, there's a formula for bringing that up to speed in relation to the price that you purchased the home for. I won't go into it too deeply because it is a formula, but what I'm saying to you is that you do get the benefit. So that stove has a new 10-year lease of life, and whatever estimate we put on it, it'll have that at 10% per annum. So, and all those sorts of things there. So there is a lot in a second-hand property. So for instance, floor coverings, carpets, 10 years, floating floors, 15, linoleum, 10. I mean, you can read it. Freestanding furniture, 13 years. So if you furnish your property, have it fully furnished, there's a 13-year depreciation on the furniture package. So with buildings, I was saying earlier, in relation to doing anything in a second-hand property post-87, it's garages and patios. So if anything has been done like that in your older property, we can revalue that because it's all part and parcel of the percentage that we can get for you. So that's all I want to say on second-hand properties. I want to encourage you to realise that there's plenty of opportunity, firstly, not to be discouraged by it. I know that TIC has mostly promoted new properties, which is fantastic. That is the bee's knees. But if you go for older properties, it's not the end of the story. It's actually the beginning of the story, really. And that's when we really come into our own as depreciation experts. We come in and we discover what's there for you to depreciate. Okay, thank you very much. You know where we are. You can always come out and talk to me.
Thanks very much, Richard.